Hello and welcome everybody to the Irish Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Platform brokerage events. So thank you to everyone that joined this morning and thank you to everybody who has joined now. So funded by BIM, we've been working very hard over the last 2 years interviewing a range of researchers and individuals from industry. And today is the culmination of that exercise. So a selection of the most promising technology and innovations that we find have potential for the Irish aquaculture industry will be presented to you today. So this session will be focusing on shellfish and will take place between 11:30 and 1 o'clock. And then from 2 o'clock until 3:30, we will have finfish. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So this session is being recorded and it will be put on the IATiP website later today, which is www.iatip.ie. And every presentation will be 15 minutes in duration and there'll be 5 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you would like to submit a question during the presentations, please move your cursor over the Zoom and you should see Q&A pop up and you can post your question there. If you have any questions after the event, please send them to secretariat@iatip.ie and we will send them to the speakers. Also, if you'd like to sign up to the IATiP mailing list, you can do that on the website. So thank you very much, and I'd like to pass over to Trish.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming along today to attend, and thank you very much in particular to the speakers. We're going to kick off today with a presentation from, and I apologize in advance for my pronunciation of this name, with a presentation from Jorge Lago Alvarado. He is from an organization called ANFACO CECO Pesca, and he's going to talk to us today about work that they have done on a paralytic shellfish poisoning detoxification process for mussels, clams and scallops. This work, I believe, was done through an EU-funded project, Seafood Tomorrow. So I'll leave the floor to you. Thank you very much, Jorge.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you see the screen? Sorry.
Not yet. You'll need to press on the green button to share your screen.
Now, I guess. Can you see me? My screen now?
Yep, very good so far.
Fine now.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to apologize for my English. That will be worse than when you say my name. That was fine. This work has been developed inside a huge European project, which is the Seafood Tomorrow project, and this work was developed mainly. This part of the job was developed mainly between two institutions, two Spanish institutions, which are ANFACO Pesca, who is where I work at, and IRTA, which is located at Catalonia. The subject of this talk is detoxification of PSP from naturally contaminated mussels, clams, and scallops. Just a very short overview of the project. Here It's a very large project, 3 years in duration, plus a half a year extension due to the COVID issues. We are 35 partners plus 13 third-party affiliate organizations, along from 19 countries, and the coordinator is the IPMA, the Portuguese Institute for Sea and Atmosphere at Portugal. The main objective of the project is looking for different eco-innovative, sustainable solutions for the seafood production and processing, which contribute for food security, mitigate production hazards, contribute to employment and increase consumer awareness of seafood quality and safety. There are several work packages, and this work was developed inside the work package 2 related to seafood processing, but there are also subjects about seafood production and nutritional claims and questions relating to market and traceability. Well, I need to. The objective of this work is to process different mollusks with PHP toxins that, when after being harvesting, if the analytical result is over the legal limit, you get a product that is not suitable for market, and then you have to destroy the product. But with this industrial processing, you can get an edible product for the market. The work is based in a currently allowed process, but which is just allowed for a species, the giant cockle. Here you have an image of it, which the scientific name is Acanthocardia tuberculatum. This is published in 1996. It's a commission decision of 18th of January. Mainly, the mollusks are have to undergo a industrial processing, which is depicted here. Cleaning in fresh water, pre-cooking step, separation of flesh and shells, a second cleaning with fresh water, cooking in fresh water for 98 Celsius, 3 minutes at least, cooling, and separation of the edible parts, because this mollusk has a very large part of mantle with and gills that are not edible, and this step was not used for mussels, for clams, and but just for scallops. And at last, they are packed and must undergo an installation step in autoclave for a minimum temperature of 116 Celsius and 51 minutes. We also add or tried a pasteurization step to check if this could be an possibility for processing the other molds. We tried several species collected from different points of the Iberian Peninsula, mainly in Galicia, Portugal, Andalusia, and Catalonia, and worked with mussels, clams, and scallops. We got samples from different red tide episodes and produced by different phytoplankton species, mainly Alexandrium and Gymnodiminium catenatum, which are the main species that produce PSP in the water. We got different concentrations in the raw product, ranging from near to the legislated limit to up to 10 times the legislated limit. The protocol was applied. The protocol which is legislated for the giant clam, for mussels, clams, and scallops, and we compare the PSP concentration in the raw material and in traditional canning, I mean with no application of the detoxification protocol, and with canning and pasteurization products that have had previously undergone the detoxification protocol. They were analyzed by HPLC, not by mouse bioassay, and using the pre-column HPLC FLD method, the AOAC official method 2005.06. So we made all the steps, the cleaning, cooking, conditioning, and packing and thermal processing. And as I said, the product, the obtained product were analyzed in 2 different laboratories with quite good correlation in the results obtained by both. So here you are the results, the obtained results in mussels that when they were raw, they had a concentration about 1,600. Just remind that the legal limit for PSP is 800 micrograms of equivalent of saxitoxin in kilo. And after these mussels, after being processing without or with the detoxification protocol, lost the PSP concentration under no detected levels. And in the right graph, you can see the detected toxins, group of toxins in the different matrix. This is raw. This group had mainly GTX14 that was eliminated by the protocol. This is a second batch of mussels from a different red tide episode from Andalusia and made by Gymnodiminium. In this case, the toxicity content was near the legal limit of 800, and after being processed, they go far under the legal limit. Again, you can see that GTX14 was eliminated, but the carbamoyl saxitoxin was the toxin which could remain in the product. Another batch, in this case from Lisbon. This was the batch with the highest concentration PSP concentration in our study. They reached up to 10 times the legal limit of 9,000. And in this case, after the application of the detoxification protocol, we did not reach safe limits. And we will talk about this at the end of the presentation. In this case, the carbamoyl saxitoxin was again the main toxin present in the after processing the product. This is a batch of mussels from Catalonia. In this case, clean mussels or not toxic mussels were immersed in a little bag who has a red tide episode, and they become toxic up to 4,000 micrograms of saxitoxin by kilo. And again, after the application of the protocol, we reach safe limits in the final product. In this case, the main toxin was GTX 14 that was almost eliminated from the processed product. In this case, we work with clams from Redondela, which is in Galicia, in the northwest of Spain. And we have a no very toxic sample, but above the legal limit, around 1,000 micrograms of PSP of saxitoxin equivalent by kilo. And again, after the processing of the samples, we reach not detected limits in the not detected levels in the sample. And in the case of scallops, we got a sample or a batch of scallops with 3,000 micrograms acetosine equivalent by kilo. The first step of evisceration got an important reduction in the concentration, and after using the detoxification protocol, we again got to safe levels in the final product. In this case, the main toxin was the carbamoyl saxitoxin. We knew that we got a safe product, but another question is if the product is good for it in terms of consumer acceptation. So we make a sensory analysis comparing the product obtained at our laboratory with commercial product, both in pasteurized product and in canned product. In this case, we did not get a product very similar to the commercial, and the scores of the product obtained at our facilities was lower or with a less quality for consumers than the commercial. Both in the case of pasteurized mussels in brine and canned mussels in pickle sauce, which is the main or the main canned product for mussels. But we think that the problem was not by the detoxification product itself, but because we could not get a good recipe. So we think that in a factory, in a real factory, the scores of the sensory analysis would be better. And now this is a video, a short video, which summarizes the whole work, and I think it's good to have a good idea. Well, we had to get special permission for harvesting the toxic product, because of course they were closed for the harvesting. Here you can see the application of the detoxification procedure. Subjected to the thermal treatment. Of the giant cockle. Well, sorry. This work has been recently published in Food and Chemical Toxicology, and here you are the title and the link for the publication, just in case you would like to consult it. And in case that you do not have access to the publication, there is a preprint available for, with open access to the publication, proposal of change in legislation that we are working on, and the raw data of toxic of the analysis of PSP in all the products, both raw and after processed.
Thank you very much for I'm sorry to cut across you on your last slide there. We've run out of time. There were two very, very quick questions. One of them, I think you answered in the video. Current regulations don't allow for the harvesting of shellfish, which are above the legal limit. So will this technology be of any use to either producer or consumer You mentioned in the video or over the video that you had to seek special permission to harvest the shellfish.
Well, we have to ask for permission to take samples for the research. For the at this moment, when a red tide is in a harvesting place, the competent authority close the harvesting area, and harvesting of mollusks is forbidden. And that's all. Even if you have a detoxification protocol, you can't use it, and that's because we have trying to get a change in legislation.
Okay.
In the case, but in the case of the giant clam, which is currently being processed in this way, there is a window of toxicity. Inside it, you can ask for permission. It's controlled by competent authorities, and the processing is just allowed for specifically companies who ask for permission to do this detoxification.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut across you just to move on to
Yes,
the next speaker. There is one other question there, and we will pass that on to you after the session this afternoon for you to answer. That was very interesting. Thank you very much. So we are now moving on to Brian Quinn from the University of West Scotland, who is going to talk about on a similar strain, if you like, or a similar theme, the potential for rapid diagnostic testing in bivalve aquaculture. Okay, thank you, Brian.
Now, has that worked?
It has, yes.
Yeah, so you can see my screen. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. It's just before 12, so it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Quinn. I am a professor in the University of the West of Scotland. You might have gathered I'm not Scottish. I'm from the fabulous town of Dundalk, but moved over here 8 years ago. I'm going to talk to you about the potential for rapid diagnostic testing in bivalve aquaculture. I'd like to thank the organisers, obviously, for this IATiP brokerage event, and of course the funders, BIM, for providing the cash. Now, okay, question. I have a couple of questions for you. This is a brokerage event, so I'm assuming that there are people here from industry. So as an academic, I want to know if the research that I'm undertaking is relevant to you guys, and how can we tweak it to produce something that's actually of use and will have impact for the industry. So my first question is, how do you, as the industry, how do you measure bivalve health in aquaculture? Or indeed, do you? Now, I'm looking at rapid non-lethal methods to assess bivalve health. There are lots of methods that are out there, and I use them myself, and I've published plenty of papers using them, where we take the bivalves, we open them up, and we dissect out the tissues, and we homogenize the tissues, and then we look at the expression of a biomarker or some sort of a chemical response or a genetic response in that tissue. That's quite time-consuming, though, and useful, but quite time-consuming. I'm just wondering, is that approach used by the industry to assess bivalve health? Obviously, we know that there are plenty of methods to quantify a pathogen within the mussels, and George, the previous speaker, was just discussing that, and we have our own Marine Institute National Reference Lab, of course, for shellfish microbiology and this shellfish biotoxin monitoring program that they undertake. But that's different. That's looking at a pathogen as opposed to looking at the health of the animal, assessing the health. So that's a slightly different thing. So the second question is this needed? I mean, a bivalve, an individual organism, isn't a high value product, whereas, 5 kilo salmon is. So I'm wondering, is there a need to assess bivalve health. Of course, each bivalve represents the population that it's a part of. So I'm just wondering, is there a commercial incentive or necessity to undertake this kind of research into developing rapid ways of assessing health of bivalves in agriculture? So the reason why I'm asking is because I happen to have a lab called the Agriculture Health Laboratory in the University of the West of Scotland. It's located in Paisley in the west of Scotland. And this lab is a new lab. It's nice and shiny, and we've got nice and shiny bits of equipment here. Basically, what we're doing is we're repurposing human diagnostic high throughput technology to assess the health at the moment of fish in aquaculture. So I've lots of equipment, I've got great staff, I've got a great laboratory, and as I say, we're using this approach at the moment. We're developing it on fish, particularly salmon. Salmon's big industry, obviously, here in Scotland. I'm going to be talking about this in more detail in the FinFish presentation this afternoon. This is heavily involving the industry. And this is why I'm looking for industry feedback from the shellfish growers. Every salmon producer in Scotland's involved in this work, and one of the two trout producers. It's been well funded because it's having impact. It's actually supported by the industry, and they want this to happen. I'm commercializing this work through Scottish Enterprise at the moment. So I'm offering this as a commercial service from hopefully 1st of September next year to the industry. And they want that because they don't want another academic to come along with another project. At the end of the project, after 2 years, we get publications, academic, which is what we want to do as scientists, but that doesn't necessarily have an impact on their industry and on their bottom line. So that's what we're doing with fish. Now, of course, will this approach work on shellfish? That's what I'm here to describe. Well, before I moved to Scotland 8 years ago, I was funded by the EPA under I had a fellowship, a 5-year fellowship from the EPA, which I took to GMIT in Galway. And there I set up the Irish Centre for Environmental Toxicology. Now, that project was looking at pharmaceuticals as a pollutant in the Irish environment, particularly in the sea. And we're looking at the impacts on biota and potentially then on humans. To do this, I use mussels because they're an excellent bioindicator species. They're obviously sessile, they stay in one place. They're filter feeders, they absorb lots of water, filter lots of water, they bioconcentrate contaminants, as we heard again from the previous speaker. So I know I've been using mussels as my test species, and we know mussels pretty well. And during this work, I came up with an idea of trying to develop environmental diagnostics as something that the EPA in particular would be interested in. And this is, again, is the adaptation of human diagnostic techniques for environmental monitoring. There is fantastic technology out there in medicine and veterinary medicine. So in this project, I was trying to tweak it to see if we could use it to look at the impact of pollutants on animals in the environment. Of course, now I've tweaked it even further to look at fish health in aquaculture, but is it possible to do this for shellfish? Well, this approach came about through a collaboration with Vinnie Foley, who is in the photo there, and he's one of the directors of Croon Diagnostics in Dublin. And they have lots of different companies that they represent, but they're the representatives also of Siemens in Ireland. And the idea is that this technology, rather than having to go through the process, as I mentioned at the beginning, where you have to dissect out the tissue and homogenize it in a buffer, separate the homogenous, get this, and then do all that, which is quite time consuming. These are automated, relatively simple technologies. Now, this is the machine that basically Vinnie loaned me. It's a company called Abaxis, and it's a Piccolo Express, and it's a compact, portable, fully automated point-of-care clinical chemistry analyzer. So again, it is foolproof. You essentially take 100 microliters of the fluid, blood, or of the animal, or homogenized tissue, supernatant, and you add 100 microliters to these wee rotors, and then you put the rotors in, you press play, and 15 minutes later you get your results. So it's got internal quality control, it's a validated technique, and gives you rapid clinical chemistry analysis. So again, is there potential for environmental monitoring was the question I was asking here. Now, we also did some work with the immunoassay, the larger ADVIA immunoassay analyzer that was housed in Cruin's lab. They did that work, looking at steroid analysis in muscles, again, particularly in relation to endocrine disruption. But I'm not going to mention that. I'm just going to focus on the clinical chemistry work. So the Piccolo Express had 13, the rotor that we used had 13 endpoints on it. Now, we got results for 8 of those when we put it in tissue for samples from muscles. So these were mostly liver function tests: alanine aminotransferase, which is ALT, aspartate aminotransferase, AST, alkaline phosphatase, ALP, gamma glutyl transferase, GGT, and then a few others: total bilirubin, amylase, creatine, and glucose. So in order to test this, we went out, and you can see this day we missed the tide. We ended up having to snorkel rather than just pick the mussels off a rock. We collected the wild mussels and we took them back to the laboratory, where we undertook in vivo laboratory-based tests to expose them, nice controlled environment to look at the impact of pharmaceuticals. We also then took the mussels and we put them into oyster cages, and we hung them outside the outfall pipes at Mutton Island and Ringsend, which are Mutton Island's Galway largest sewage treatment plant, and of course Ringsend in Dublin, because we were interested in the effluent coming from the wastewater treatment plant. Again, looking at pharmaceuticals, particularly looking at those. And then I did another little study in the South Wall in Ringsend, which I'll talk about in a moment. We did some fish work also, but of course that's not for today. Okay, so this shows the clinical chemistry analysis of Vitalist species, because we didn't know it's a mixture of whether it's Scala provincialis or Edulis in the west coast of Ireland, so we just called it Vitalist species. And these are the results that we got for the digestive gland exposed to diclofenac. So again, we had to kill the animal, take out the digestive gland, homogenize it, centrifuge it, and then we put the supernatant into the instrument. Again, just to test to see if we could get, we didn't know if we'd get any results. The mussels had been exposed to diclofenac, which is a pharmaceutical non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And here we had 7 days and 14-day exposure, and we sampled some at 7 and 14 days. And we've got a control, a solvent control, and then concentrations of 1 and 1,000 micrograms per liter. And you can see that there are significant results, significant impacts being registered using the clinical chemistry in the Piccolo. You can see significant decreases here in both the ALT and the AST, and again, significant decreases in the alkaline phosphatase and the amylase. So that was using the digestive gland. But what about the hemolymph? Now, hemolymph is like the blood of mussels, essentially. It's the circulatory system, the liquid in the circulatory system. It is quite easy to get out of a mussel, you'd be surprised. So you just have to make a little indentation in the shell, stick in a syringe into the large adductor muscle, and then gently pull it out. And you can get 1 to 1.5 mils of hemolymph per muscle. Of course, that's much quicker. There's no homogenization, so it's a much more rapid, easier way to get your sample. When we put it in, of course, it's much more dilute than blood. And these instruments are made for human blood, so it's much, much more dilute. So we found through a lot of experimentation that we had to concentrate 4 mils down to 100 microliters using an ultrafiltration step. So again, not too bad. It does take a bit of time, but not too bad. And these are some, we were doing some sort of validation tests. So I got a large pot of hemolymph from several different mussels, and I sampled it at different times. Some of it was sampled fresh, some of it was frozen and sampled afterwards. So you can see that fresh up to 48 hours, there's no huge difference, no significant differences in the expression of the markers. However, after 96 hours, we're starting to see an impact. But if you freeze it, the responses are lower, but it doesn't degrade over time. And then we did some reproducibility tests as well, looking at the coefficient of variation values. And generally, a coefficient of variation below 20% is seen as acceptable for clinical chemistry. So most of them came, obviously the lower the better. Amylase was the only one above 20%. Most of them were around that or lower. So again, shows that it was acceptable reproducibility. again, these are preliminary results. This is work that I'd done a while ago and hasn't been repeated. So again, this is just giving you an indication. So I went to Dublin Bay and I was interested to see the impact of Ringsend, the treatment plant in Ringsend. And again, these were wild mussels taken. And all I did was I went and I took the hemolymph from the wild mussels. So again, a similar procedure that could be used in a farm on a mussel or bivalve farm. So this is the effluent pipe near this red dot, and that's site 1, site 2, site 3. And then we had what we thought would be a control site near Black Rock, but I don't know if there's another pipe that goes in there. I've no idea. So here you can see that we got results, we got numbers. Now, as a scientist, this graph is horrendous because the error bars are enormous and it doesn't show any significance, but it shows a trend that there's a reduction from site 1 down to site 3 in several of the biomarkers that were expressed. However, this information, this data was generated using, as I said, the Abaxis Piccolo, and we cannot change any of the parameters in that instrument. In my lab in Scotland here, I have a large instrument, and I've been working with the manufacturers of the instrument and who make the kits as well. And we've adapted that instrumentation and kits specifically for fish. We've changed the reference values, we've changed some of the kits and the dilutions and the concentrations. So we've made it specific to fish. We could potentially, and that means that we can get a lot more information and a lot more cross-reactivity. That we could potentially also do for bivalves if there was an interest in the industry. And again, that comes back to the questions. Does the industry need or want this approach? A rapid method to assess a bivalve health. There's potential there, but, and I'm interested in doing it, but and this is where it'd be useful to get feedback from the industry folk. Is this something that is required or is of interest to the industry? That's me. Thank you. And we'll have a discussion now. I'm under my 15 minutes, so hopefully we'll have time for a few questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Brian. Yeah, that's great. We're doing very well on time. There is one comment and answer to your question. Yes, there is a desire to establish the health of bivalve shellfish, especially for seed or juveniles, which are transported for on-growing. It's probably the vitality that counts in terms of their subsequent performance and growth rates. So there's a question then from a producer. What can be put on the bench on a farm or in the hands of a farmer undertaken in situ, i.e., is there something within your product or on offer that can be used by the farmer as opposed to having to go to a lab for results or analysis?
Yes, well, again, as I say, the results that we generated were generated using an instrument that anyone could use. Now, the cartridges themselves are they're a few quids. They're about, I think they're about 22 euros. So, but that's for one mussel, but it gives you 14 endpoints. So it's not that. So that's the downside of doing it yourself. So yes, there are instruments that are available that you can purchase and use yourselves. However, as I said, the problem is that they can't be adapted for use on mussels. They're closed systems. In my lab, because it's a research lab in the university, we've been able to play with it, and I've been doing this for 4 years, so it's not an easy thing to do, but we've been able to make it more particular to fish blood, but we could again adapt it for mussel blood. So the answer is possibly. It would obviously need investigation to make sure yeah, but as I say, one complicated fact might be that you need to concentrate the hemolymph, so you need to centrifuge it, which again is doable. But when I was dealing with the salmon industry, they don't want things on site. They just wanted to take the sample and send it to a central laboratory, and that for them is a much more efficient way of doing it, rather than having to have somebody on site with equipment that might need calibration and training and laboratory and stuff like that. So possibly, something, please get in touch and we can investigate it. If there is, I'll whatever information I have, I'll pass on to you. Vinny would be delighted to sell a few more of his piccolos.
Okay. There is one other question, but I think we're just at 12:15, so that I'm afraid we'll have to leave that one, and we'll pass it on to you later. So thank you very much for that, Brian. It was very interesting. Moving on now to Ian Phillips. Ian Phillips is from a company called Anua Clean Air International, and his presentation is entitled Shell-Based Media Used for Clean Air Biotechnologies. Go ahead there, Ian.
Okay, you can see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. Okay, my name is Ian Phillips. I'm Director of Anua Clean Air Technology. Just to thank BAM and the Secretariat for the opportunity to speak here today, and just to make a presentation relating to the use of shell-based biotrickling and biofiltration technologies. By way of background, our origins were in a company called Bord-na-Móna. Bord-na-Móna originally looked at the whole area of using peat for air pollution treatment and for wastewater treatment dating back to the early 90s. And there was a number of different business units that sprang out of that initiative. I was part of one of those. Bord-na-Móna took a decision to exit that business area in its entirety in around 2015. And a number of us who were involved in developing both technology and business got together and set up a new company and continued with the work. So currently we're based in, we've taken a 10-year lease from Bord-na-Móna on premises in Port Arlington. So we do our manufacturing and our processing and packaging of medias and so forth there. So so that's by way of background. Let's see now. Just apologies for that. Just by way of background, I guess, and I was very interested in Brian's presentation. I was shot at Rings End and Mutton Island, just to say we have shell-based technology on both of those sites treating air emissions from the different processes in the wastewater treatment. So since the early 90s, we've been involved, and originally, obviously coming out of Bord-na-Móna, we looked at the use of peat for use of biofiltration technologies. So the basis of the technology is relatively straightforward. You pass your air through a media where you immobilize bacteria, which basically will oxidize the contaminant. So the contaminant is captured on the surface of the media, and the media supports the biofilm, and the contaminant is broken down. Initially, as I say, the work was largely focused on the use of peat. One of the limiting factors, though, when you're treating emissions, and most of these emissions are either sulfur, nitrogen, or volatile organic compounds. When you're dealing with sulfur groups, the hydrogen sulfide oxidizes to sulfate, so it produces an acidic byproduct. And it causes the pH of the media to reduce, and your effectiveness on some of the more complex compounds then is affected by that. So your ability to remove the contaminant from the airstream and to treat it is affected. So that was one of the reasons for it looking at shells as a potential media. Shells have a very high percentage of calcium carbonate, and it's bound up in a biopolymer, so it can effectively be slow released as you require it. So by using shells, effectively you created what you could call a biochemical reactor. So again, you have the same process. Your reaction takes place on the surface of the shell. You immobilize a bacteria or an inoculum, and you get a biofilm established on the surface of the shell. You recirculate water through the medium, and the contaminant, the air is blown through, and the contaminant you're trying to remove is transferred into the water, and it's broken down on the surface of the shell media. And where acidic byproducts like sulfuric acid are produced, the shell releases calcium carbonate to neutralize that acid. So it means you have a inbuilt pH control in your filter. There's no need to add chemicals or to use a very high washout rate on the circulation water. So that's really what the potential advantage of using shells were. Our initial work was based on mussel shells, and it really became one of the limiting factors in growing the business. So what I want to talk to you a little bit about is some of the work we did looking at other species. So we looked at a variety of species to see if we could come up with the best configuration so that we could effectively internationalize this business, and look at sourcing shells in different markets and using product as close to the application as possible. I suppose since the 90s, and that's really the main thing there in relation to this slide, is that we have a huge amount of experience on different types of waste airstreams. Predominantly, though, this technology is used on large-scale municipal wastewater treatment plants. You know, since about 1990, then you've seen basically where solid waste traditionally would have gone to landfill, but you're starting to see the more and more large-scale biological, mechanical, thermal treatment facilities for separating and treating different waste streams. And that's become quite a significant application for us. So most of that processing is done in large buildings, and you extract the air from the buildings, and that air is highly odorous and needs to be treated before discharge to atmosphere. And then for the food and pharmaceutical sector, again, typically you're looking at wastewater treatment applications where you have either solvent or odors emitting from wastewater treatment plants, or you have specific low cold emissions on site where there are specific VOCs that need to be treated. And again, this type of technology can be deployed for that. Just in terms of our business proposition, really what we're trying to affect is we've moved to patent any of the technologies that we've developed. So our value proposition is around offering proven patented technologies, which not only provide best-in-class performance, but really we're interested in offering lowest utility and life cycle cost. And by utility, we really mean the amount of water that you require and the energy usage. So there's an energy requirement to get the air to pass through the filtration media. And then in terms of water usage, we recirculate water. A lot of these systems, if you don't have inbuilt pH control, you have to release the water at a certain pH, so the water demand can be quite high. So really that's what our focus is getting best-in-class performance at the lowest life cycle cost. I suppose more recently, the fact again that we've been focusing on shells, and we'll talk a little bit about crumb rubber as well, but using different what you might call secondary products, or products that would have been regarded as a waste. Really it's a double hit from an environmental point of view, where we're recovering and reutilizing materials that previously would have been regarded as potentially problematic, and we're adding value, and we're building them into high value technology that, as it performs, is considerably cheaper to operate than conventional technologies, which will be chemical scrubbers, activated carbon, and thermal oxidizers. So we've effectively developed a range of technologies to compete with those conventional technologies, but operate at a much lower life cycle and energy input. And we're effectively utilizing waste streams. So it's a triple hit really for the environment. That's just it. And again, that's just really how we present ourselves to our clients. So really, we're trading on a significant track record of over 25 years. And we have a large number of installations out there right across the world. And our technologies are proven over a 20-year period. So that gives us significant, I suppose it gives us a good pedigree. That just gives you an idea of over that period where we have installations done using most of the export ones would either be shell-based or a peat product, which we still use, a granular peat product called monofill. The monofill product, there's a photograph of it there, is typically used on the large composting plants. The shell-based media is mostly used on wastewater treatment plants and on pharmaceutical and petrochemical applications, where we're dealing with sulfur compounds. That's just some of our typical client base. So in the main, we deal with large utility groups, food industry, pharmaceutical, petrochemical, and conglomerations of companies who come together to do solid waste projects. That's really just somehow that this technology really was rooted in the original one, which was using peat-based product for organic media biofilters, as they were called. That's your peat media there. It's supported on a raised floor, if you like. The air is blown in underneath, and there's a plenum chamber that allows the air to distribute evenly underneath the peat, and then the air passes up through the peat media. And there's an irrigation system then. So with a classical biofilter, and that's really what this is, your contaminants are removed, and you use the irrigation system not only to keep the media wet, but also to flush out any byproducts or salts that are created from the breakdown of inorganic compounds like ammonia or hydrogen sulfide. So those hydrogen sulfide would oxidize to sulfate, ammonia to nitrate, so you would wash those salts out in the irrigation water. And this is more typically how we would have set up our monoshell technology. I'll have a slide there later on which show you how it works, but typically we go for an enclosed unit. Again, the media is supported on an internal flooring. The air is, we prefer what's called co-current, so the air goes down through the media. The reason for this is because the shells do dissolve over time, and you're trying to minimize the impact of settlement. So by going co-current where the air and the water is going together, the air is effectively helping to push the water through the media, and it reduces back pressure, so you have lower fan power consumption on the fan. So typically your air is in the top, the air goes down through the media, then it's pulled through the fan and out to atmosphere. That's your irrigation system there. There's a below ground sump. Your inoculum is introduced to that on startup, and the water is continuously recirculated. We release water then. And what we look at is we look at the conductivity in the water, the amount of salt build up. So we need to keep the conductivity below the saturation point for calcium sulfate if we're dealing with hydrogen sulfide to stop mineralization. So we release a certain amount of water then. The chrome rubber process was basically a similar process, but we're using waste car tires, which are shredded. Again, we're sticking with the theme, but the car tires have a catalytic affinity for sulfur. So we effectively managed with this technology. It took a long time to get the biology to work because of zinc, and it was an antimicrobial, but we eventually overcame that. And the advantage with this really, it's an inert media, it'll operate at very low pH, so we can use it as a pre-filter to the shells to knock down very high levels of H2S. And we've done work on biogas with it, treating very, very high levels of H2S. But again, the same principle, biotrickling principle, using a media that has a natural affinity for the compound you're trying to remove. And here you have the advantage of two dynamics going on together. You have biological oxidation, and you have a catalytic reaction as well. This really tracks the development. What you see really is we started with organic media, and we could treat, the organic media biofilters were regarded as a bit of a black art, and going back in the 80s. We set out really to try and identify what the critical parameters were to put so that you could develop reliable technologies with predictable performances where you could offer meaningful process guarantees. In other words, you could give a guarantee, we'll put a filter in. If you guarantee the inlet conditions are within these boundaries, we'll guarantee outlet conditions against those inlet conditions. And we were one of the first to attempt to do that. And we did that by setting up column studies and looking at different concentration regimes and identifying the key parameters. The key parameters really were around temperature, pH control, contact time, and concentration of contaminant. Typically though, with organic media, you were limited because of this issue with pH, of controlling pH, treating up to about 30 ppm max of hydrogen sulfide. And that really pushed us into looking at shells because of the potential use in the calcium media for regulating pH. And that was a significant jump for us. We were able to treat up to 50 ppm, which means that the range of applications that you could potentially apply your technology to extended. One of the limitations though with this was just the availability of shells. We were, as I say, the technology was based on mussel shell originally. We had looked at oyster shells and they were very large and the air was tracking and bypassing through, so we couldn't get effective treatment. But we went on in around 2010 to do a detailed study looking at various shells. We looked at Quinn scallops, we looked at American quahogs, we looked at cockle shells, we looked at one of them, scallops, cockles, king scallops, Quinn, about 5 different types of shell. in a bench trial, comparative trial, where we set up columns side by side to try and identify the different performance criteria of different shells under different conditions. The output from this really was, and some earlier work that we've done, is that by staging the filters, we could utilize the heavier grade shells in the first stage of the filter, and we could improve the overall efficiency of the filter at the same contact time and at the same size. And the reason for this was by staging effectively, what you do is if you can imagine where you have a filter, you divide it in two and you pass the gas through half the filter at a much higher face velocity. And with a larger grade shell like the oyster or the king scallop, that higher face velocity prevented the bypassing or the tracking of the air through the media, and your elimination capacity increased at the higher face velocity. So it meant by staging, we could effectively start to look at developing a process where we could use all the different types of shells potentially available to us. The mustard shell, there's no doubt, is the most effective, and our tendency is to use that in the last stage. It's the most effective, but you're limited by two things. The density tends to be a little bit low, so the media life is short when you're very high concentrations. So by multi-staging, it allows us to effectively use the heavier grade of larger shells, which in a single stage system are really quite very low effectiveness in terms of removal efficiency. But the efficiency increases significantly when we use on a multi-stage filter. And it allows us, again, it broadened the application base up to about 200 parts per million. And we're down to look at the crumb rubber as a potential pre-filter, and that could get us potentially into the thousands of parts per million. So really what you're looking at here is the development of biotrickling technologies using different medias, mainly shell-based medias because of the advantage with the pH control, but effectively allowing us to broaden the application to being able to do a very narrow range of applications, being able to more or less take on the full gamut of applications on wastewater and solid waste applications, and moving into the whole realm of attempting to remove H2S from biogas and landfill gas, where you see extremely high levels up into the thousands. That's just the same thing graphically, and it's just to give you that idea that we started with peat and we moved on to shells, and the shells were a huge breakthrough for us because we went from being a very marginal technology to being able to compete head-on with chemical scrubbers and thermal oxidizers. We did significant work on VOC as well. I'd talk about that separately, but it's a more complex application, but this technology also has significant application for that and for treating difficult process emissions. Yeah, they're just typical installations then. That's on our rendering plant. That's a monoshell installation in Crossness in London. That's the installation there, the shell-based media is in these units here. And then it's discharged atmosphere. It's treating air from the inlet works in Crossness. It's one of the bigger wastewater treatment plants in London. It's just a video there really just to show you how that works. So that's your shell-based media there. Irrigation system where we have water continuously circulating through the media. The air enters in, as we say, we go with this co-current arrangement, so the air enters in at the top of the filter. It goes down through, it spreads through a pressure plenum. It's an area above the media that allows the air to distribute before it goes through. It's important that we make even contact with the filter media, and the characteristics of the filter media, in other words, the particle size, the density, are also quite important. What we're looking for is good even contact with as much as the surface area as we can get. So the air passes through, we have a recirculation sump then where the water is recirculated continuously. And that water, we introduce the inoculum and nutrients on startup to get a biofilm to establish them, and we don't have any requirement then to continuously top up. So the main cost in terms of running these systems are the power and the cost of purge water, which is typically between 1% and 5% of the total amount of water we recirculate. On wastewater treatment plants, if we have good quality filtered final effluent, we can use that. So we don't always have to use, well, potable water isn't a requirement for us. Okay.
Ian, can I just ask you if you could sum up what you have presented so far, so we have time for a question? Thank you. Okay,
so I mean that's really probably a good slide then. And that's really what the monoshell technology gives us. We can, effectively gives us a process that eliminates chemical usage. We can compete with conventional technologies, and we have the advantages of using recovered media, and with low energy and low water usage. The work that we did specifically, though, and really to effectively internationalize this business, we needed to be able to use all the different grades of shells available, because the potential for the technology is limited by the availability of the different shell types of media. So we have successfully developed a process, and we've patented the multi-stage process where we can utilize oysters, scallops, cockles, mussels, quahogs, the whole realm, clams, the whole realm of shells that are available to us in the different markets. Okay, I can wrap it up with that if you like, Patricia.
Okay, yeah, that's great. There are a couple of questions, I think, from very interested shellfish producers in the audience, and I suppose to combine the two, one of them wondering what sort of treatment the shells might require in advance of you being able to use them. I suppose, does Anua Clean Air take on that role in terms of treatment? And are you looking for shell from the industry, and how can you support the industry in getting that shell to you?
Okay. In general, what we see in terms of media is we see two grades of media. One is media where the meat has been chucked, and you're left with a product that isn't perfect, but it's it can be odorous and it can be difficult to handle, but generally it's clean. So that product we would take in, and we would, like, what our philosophy is we pay a price for that. We pay shellfish suppliers for that product. There's a second grade of product available, which we've been doing a good bit of work on over the last couple of years, is where it's a waste product which has the meat content still in it. Our focus on that was to look at using our own process, effectively recirculating water with a biological agent in it, and converting skips to create a bioreactors that we could leave a unit on supplier sites and self-clean, or start the process of self-cleaning that product and bring it into our works and finish the cleaning, and utilize that. So typically what we would have to do, and we see, like, we would take in a fair amount of shells from different suppliers. What we're seeing is, so we see some product that's contaminated with meat, we see some product that's heavily contaminated with sand, and then we see some product that needs to be screened or graded. So we basically have a facility where we're starting, I suppose, to put equipment in place where we can do all those processes. So we can clean it if there's a high sand content, or we can bio-clean it if there's a high meat content. So the answer to your question is yes, we are interested in all the different types of shells that are available on the different grades. And as we grow this industry out, we see the demand for we see that there's been one of the risks and limitations to growth is the availability of media. So we're currently taking, just to give you an idea, we're taking shells in at the moment from Denmark. We're taking some in from the UK. We're sourcing shells from 2 or 3 different producers in Ireland as well. So we're shipping significant quantities of shells and back out to southern Italy, to the UK, to the US, to as far as China. There was installations went into China last year. So that's just to give you some idea. So what we'd see, or what we'd hope to see, is a partnership growing over the years with different processors, where we could, if it's a product that's it's high meat content, what we'd look to do is to take that product away for free, to sort of save the cost of disposal. And if it's a product where the meat has been taken out and it's a reasonable quality, is how we would pay for that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Ian. There are other questions there, but the organisers will be able to pass those on to you afterwards and get answers to the people. So moving on now to our final presenter from this session, from Wageningen University in Holland. We have, and again, I'm going to apologise for my poor pronunciation, Jeroen Wijsman, speaking on a practical production model for mussel culture in the oyster shells in the Netherlands. So Jeroen, if you are ready to go there, if you could just unmute, that's great. And we can see your presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, you can see it already. Can you hear me also?
It's a little bit faint for me anyway.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just about. I think that might be a little bit better now.
So I'll try it this way.
Much better, much better. Thank you.
I'll try to do it without the mic. Okay, thank you. So my name is Jeroen Wijsman. I work at Wageningen Marine Research in the Netherlands. I will give a presentation about a model that we've been developing last year on the production of mussels in the Netherlands that the shellfish farmers can use. Okay, my institute is part of the Wageningen University. And Wageningen University is composed of a university part and also a research part. The research part is composed of 10 different institutes. And one of those institutes is focusing on marine research, and that's where I work. Here, this dot is the location of Wageningen, almost in the center of the Netherlands. But close to the coast, we have 3 different institutes or 3 locations where the marine research is based. In the north, in Den Helder, we have an institute mainly focusing on the Wadden Sea. We have an institute in IJmuiden, mainly focusing on fish research in the North Sea. And here in the southwestern part of the Netherlands, this the center of the shellfish culture. We also have a location in Wijsman. That's the location where I work, and we are focusing mainly on shellfish culture, but also the ecology of the southwestern part of the Netherlands. So mussel culture in the Netherlands, it's on bottom culture. So seeds is fished in the wild or collected with mussel seed collectors, and from that it's translocated to the culture plots in the Wadden Sea over here, the northern part of the Netherlands, and culture plots in the Oosterschelde. The culture is very much depending on the natural environment. The shellfish farmers are depending on the nature for the new recruits. They have to fish it in the wilds. The shellfish are dependent on food, natural food sources, phytoplankton, but they also express to natural occurring predators like starfish, but also crabs. And it's also depending on the environmental conditions, currents, storms, but also the water temperature is important for the culture. When we look at the fishery for the seed in the Wadden Sea, they do that in autumn and in spring, where they just collect the mussels in the wild by boats. Here in blue you can see the total production from this fishery for seed in the Wadden Sea. And since about 2006, they're also collecting the mussel seeds using mussel seed capture devices floating in the water column. And you see that since then, in orange here, that the production of those mussel seeds collectors have increased over the time. And they are now almost half the production is from those mussel seed collectors. The average production of mussel seed is about 42 million kilos a year, but you can also see that there are strong fluctuations from year to year, and that's depending on the natural spadfall and in the wilds. You see that the production of the mussel seeds collecting devices, they are relatively constant, and depending on how much of substrate you are hanging outside. But especially the fishery is fluctuating from year to year. The total production, so those are the consumption mussels landed at the auction in Wijsman. They are landed from from the Wadden Sea in orange here, but also from the Oosterschelde. It's also changing from year to year, also depending on the seed resources in previous years. And when you divide the seed collection over the production, you get a sort of measure of the return yields. And on average, the return yield of the mussel sector is about 1.5 kilograms of consumption mussels produced from 1 kilograms of mussel seed. And that's not very high. And you see that in some years, this yield is even a little bit more than 1. So that's not very high. And for the mussel farmers, it's very important to increase the return yield for the mussel production, so also the total production can increase. And when you look at the return yields, it's actually depending on 2 factors. On one hand, it's the food availability. If there's a lot of food, the mussels can grow and they become consumption size within 1 year. Also, food quality is of importance. If the phytoplankton is of good quality, the shellfish can grow harder. But also, water temperature is important. When water temperature is high, the activity of the mussel is high, and will also influence the growth of the mussel. On the other hand, also the survival is important. When you seed the mussel seed to the culture plots, they can be attacked by predators, starfish, and also crabs. But also storms can have an impact. If you have a lot of storms, the mussel seed can be displaced from the culture plot and are lost for the farmer. But also the activity of the farmers is important. Some farmers also actively remove starfish from the culture plots, so they increase also the survival rates. We have developed a model based on the dynamic energy budget theory, where we simulate the growth of mussels on a culture plot as a function of, on one hand, the food, phytoplankton, and also the water temperature. And the result of the model is actually the growth of the mussels at the culture plot, and also the condition, so the meat content of the mussels. For that, we did in the Oosterschelde. Here we have a plot of the Oosterschelde at different locations. We put mussels into containers at the sites and follow them during the whole season. And we started that in 2014, and during the season we measured the growth, so the length of the shell, but also the condition index of those mussels. Here you can see some of the results of those measurements. We see the growth in length and also the flesh weight at a location here close to the storm surge barrier in the western part of the Oosterschelde, and for example here location more to the eastern part of the Oosterschelde. Depending on the differences in food conditions, phytoplankton, but also the temperature, we were able to model the growth of the mussels at those locations. So those dots are the measurements, and the line is the result of the model. In order to calculate and also to predict for the whole Oosterschelde the food conditions, so the amount of phytoplankton at each time step, we have developed the dynamic ecosystem model of the Oosterschelde with some state variables like the dissolved nitrogen, phytoplankton, zooplankton, detritus, but also shellfish and microphytobenthos and bottom detritus. And all the links between those state variables are included in the model. The hydrodynamics of the Oosterschelde were also estimated with for this model. So at each time step, we know how much water is coming from the North Sea and enters the Oosterschelde. And this is actually joined in the results of the model. This is the different compartments we have modeled for the Oosterschelde, 28 compartments. And for example, for this compartment, we see the changes in phytoplankton concentration over the time. The dots over here are the field measurements to compare the model with. So with this model, we were able to predict at each location in the Oosterschelde the food conditions, so the amount of phytoplankton at each time step, and this can be used with the growth model of the mussels to predict actually the growth of the model and the quality of the model. We have developed a Shiny application. It's available also on the web. Here you can see the link to that application, and actually the mussel farmers can use this app to simulate the growth and development of a cohort they have put into the Oosterschelde. For example, here they started with mussel seeds. They seeded at actually here at location 26. At this time, the 1st of September 2010, the mussels had a certain size. They have to add a mortality weight. And then they said, well, the 1st of April 2011, we move the mussels, the seed mussels, from this location to a more productive area in the western part of the Oosterschelde. And at the 1st of July 2012, they have harvested the mussels and brought it to the auction. From that, the mussel can predict actually what are the food conditions at the different locations. So this was the location more to the west, and this was the location more to the east. The temperature was not different. And in this plot, you can see the development of the mussels over the time. Over here, you see the shell length. The shell length at the location in the eastern part of the Oosterschelde. At this moment, they relocated the mussels from the east to the west, and you can see that also due to that the growth has increased because there's more food available at that location, and also the meat content has increased. And from that, the mussel farmers can calculate the return yields and also play with this model to put it at different locations in the Oosterschelde and see if they can increase actually the return yield of those mussels by using the optimal locations for the mussel growth. So the take-home messages of this presentation. In the Netherlands, due to the bottom culture, we have actually a low return yields of the mussel culture, and because the price for the mussel seeds from the Wadden Sea is increasing, also an increase in the return yield is desired. Therefore, an optimal use of the spatial but also the temporal variability of the food conditions within the Oosterschelde, but also in the Wadden Sea is of importance. And we have developed the InnoPro model with a actually user-friendly interface to simulate the culture process and to let the mussel farmers and see how they can increase the return yield of the mussels. So I want to end with this, and here again you can see the link to the websites where you can play with and see how it works. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Jeroen. We have a number of questions up. One is, in order to apply these models in Ireland, what kind of information do you need from the producers?
Yeah, actually the model is quite generic because it simulates the growth of mussels, and growth of mussels in the Netherlands is not different than growth of mussels in Ireland, because they eat food, they eat phytoplankton, and they make use of the water temperature. But what is different is that a bay in Ireland is not the same as the Oosterschelde. So you have to make the demo model. You have to make it fit for the bay in Ireland. So the exchange rates in the bay with the water from outside, but also the temperature of the water, also the nutrients input into the bay should be known. So you can calculate actually the phytoplankton conditions over time.
Okay, so is the app, is there a cost associated with using the model?
The app is for free. Everybody can use the app, but it's only the Oosterschelde. It's not for a bay in Ireland. And what I said, to make it applicable to a bay in Ireland, you have to adapt the water quality model for that.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we are very close to finishing up this session. I want to say a big thank you to all of the presenters and to IATiP. I think we had a really nice, diverse range of presentations that address a lot of the difficult issues for producers and also any of the processors that are here today. So thank you very much for that. So we are going to take a break now, and lunch is to be for an hour. We'll be back at 2 o'clock then for the Shellfish Brokerage session, and that will be chaired by my colleague Jeff Robinson. So I think that wraps up this session. Again, thank you very much to everybody involved for putting that together and giving your time for the presentation.